Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires to talk about the Empire in itself. With the delay of Thrones Decay and with Creative Assembly stating that they are going to add more content to Thrones Decay, hopefully they will be improving the Empire, giving them a major racial rework, because they absolutely need it. For Volkmar, what Volkmar needs is a way to get the Books of Nagash through diplomacy, because having to sail all the way into Ulthuan, having to fight Tyrion or Alariel, or likely both, for a Book of Nagash is not a great situation in his campaign. Then, for Marcus Wolfhard, the hostility meter and the rogue army of lizardmen that spawns that he has to deal with is also annoying. Also, the climate that Marcus Wolfhard does have to deal with, not all that great either. But really, the big problem in terms of campaign mechanics, Imperial Authority. Imperial Authority is just outright garbage. It slows down your expansion. It means that you're not taking as much territory as many other factions, which makes the Empire significantly weaker. And even when you do take territory with the Confederation for which you're spending Imperial Authority, in quite a lot of cases you may not necessarily be gaining that much territory. Because consider Averheim, Averland, for instance. They only start with 2 regions. Maybe they'll have more by the time you do end up confederating them, but it's frustrating. Also, the lack of defensive alliances, military alliances, and so on and so forth also ends up hurting Imperial campaign to a significant degree. What it really means is that if you're playing an Imperial campaign, the best thing you can do is cheese it in order to get as much Imperial Authority as possible to either confederate certain factions in the Empire or to just outright conquer them by paying the cost of Imperial Authority. That's the situation. Not a great campaign dynamic that Karl Franz or Balthasar Gelt have to deal with. So it's either a mechanic you cheese or it's a mechanic that's really horrible to deal with. I would say that Imperial Authority needs to be thrown into the garbage bin. Because you look at Cathay, you look at the High Elves, who do, for the most part, like if you're playing a High Elven campaign, or you're playing a Cathayan campaign, Cathay I think is the better example really than the High Elves. Because if you're playing a High Elf campaign, you are going to go to war with Terranok, or maybe even Kalidor, likely both. But if you're playing a Cathayan campaign, well, in a Cathayan campaign, the terrain of Cathay is designed in such a way that you do want to confederate, and confederations are easy, they're not too much of a problem. I also feel like it's sad when Bretonnia, of all factions, can unify itself far easier and far better than the Empire. Confederations and the Empire should not carry the same kind of diplomatic and public order negatives that we've seen in the past. But yeah, I think Imperial Authority needs to go by the wayside. We should be able to confederate in a regular fashion. We should be able to get our relations with the Empire up. Or if Creative Assembly does decide to keep Imperial Authority to some degree, they should not limit your diplomatic options. But if you do have a good amount of fealty, if you do have a good amount of Imperial Authority, it will benefit you from the perspective of diplomacy making confederations easier. The problem of the Empire is that their early game ends up being completely miserable, especially when they're dealing with Drykov, Festus, Azag, Vlad in their early game. But once you take control of the entirety of the Empire, it's game over. There's nothing more to it. That's one of the fundamental problems with Imperial Authority. And the changes that they made, like Karl Franz, for instance, having a replenishment in foreign territory for his army, in neutral territory for his army, is just not good enough from my point of view. So the system needs to go. On top of that, the Empire does have other issues as well. Their economy is decent, though not necessarily the best in the world, but hey, you can generate up to 500 income for the Tailors Guild. That's certainly a decent level of income. What is annoying when it comes to building up as the Empire is that you need multiple buildings to recruit units. And unlike, say, the Wood Elves, this is genuinely frustrating. The reason it's so frustrating is because you need this building to be able to unlock great swords, which are one of the crucial units you do want to get as the Empire as quickly as possible. The fact that great swords are a tier 3 unit is also not that great to deal with. Really, what this really means is that if you're playing an Imperial campaign, you're far better off getting a lot of growth, getting a lot of Shrines of Sigmar, and massing as many Warrior Priests as possible. It does work. It is a playstyle that works. Warrior Priest, Crossbowman does end up working, as opposed to bothering with anything else. Another issue that the Empire does have is that while they do have some powerful artillery, that artillery is locked behind tier 4. Mortars are just not that great of a unit, especially with the way the AI behaves on Legendary Very Hard or Very Hard Battle difficulty. Mortars are just not that great of a unit. You want cannons and you want Hellstorm rocket batteries, but the problem is you require a tier 4 settlement. And it just takes a lot of time. You have a lot of sieges ahead of you in an Empire campaign, so not having artillery available early on in that campaign is just painful. I think artillery for every faction should be available. Some artillery options should be available from tier 2 in a campaign. Because we already have a situation in many campaigns where you just focus on 1 or 2 units, even though the unit variety might be significantly better, but you just focus on a couple of units because that's the best way to play. And I think I can speak for a lot of people. When you have a varied army of multiple units, it's a lot more fun. That's one of the benefits of playing, say, Warriors of Chaos or even the Chaos Dwarves, because you will have a greater variety of units in your campaign, especially Warriors of Chaos. But Chaos Dwarves can also benefit from this as well. On top of that, a lot of their lords and heroes just aren't that great. Because generals of the Empire, if we look at a general of the Empire, they don't have any special skill line. They don't have anything that makes them good. Archlectors are decent, but just that, decent. Huntsman General, they don't work because ranged lords and heroes don't work particularly well within the context of Warhammer 3. At least in terms of fighting battles against AI. Like, they can do a lot of damage if they can shoot, but the problem is due to AI behavior, the fact you're going to be outnumbered in a lot of battles, so on and so forth, Huntsman Generals don't end up being that particularly useful. And the hero types? Well, Warrior Priests are the only good hero types. The other ones are just fairly lackluster. Yes, you do have a great variety in terms of magic, but your mages don't feel that great. And Empire Captains and Witch Hunters are also not all that special, which they should be. And the Empire really, if you play a campaign against the Empire, and this is the reality of it, all of the issues the Empire has means that even when you're playing a campaign against the Empire, you will steamroll them. This is a pretty odd situation given the lore, the Empire being one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful faction in the setting, the most powerful race, if you will, in the entire setting. That's certainly not how they feel like. Like, if you're playing a campaign as Vlad, or Azag, or Draika, or Festus, you obliterate the Empire. Or even Khazrak, you obliterate the Empire. That's not how it should be. Like, Khazrak should be a minor nuisance at best, because that's really what he ended up being in the lore for the Empire. Well, I'm sure Boris would disagree with that particular assessment, but that's simply the reality of it. Other things that Creative Assembly could do for the Empire: a political system similar to the Chaos Dwarves, an economy system similar to the Chaos Dwarves, caravan system, all of those would fit in very well. I also think that we do need a change to the Ogre Mercenary system, because one of the things that would genuinely help the Empire, especially when it comes to laying siege to settlements, would be the ability of recruiting ogres early on in your campaign to use them for sieges. Like, even basic ogre bulls would be able to do that decently well. So just a couple of ideas, just a couple of things that the Empire could need: changing of campaign mechanics for all the campaigns, removal of buildings that are just restricting your recruitment, improvement of diplomacy in the campaign and just making overall the Empire have more choice, consequences, and just playing better instead of being the laughing stock in Total War Warhammer that everyone demolishes on their path to glory. Like, going in the Empire as any other campaign is the easiest thing you can do in that campaign. And that's not how it should be. Costin signing out. If you do enjoy my content, consider supporting me via PayPal or Patreon.